Hey everybody, it's Tommy Kennelly and welcome to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. Today, the co-founder of Forge, and he has served on an apprenticeship training committee, the president of Stevenson Company, and is on the welding advisory committee at Washburn Institute of Technology. He's a volunteer at the Evel Knievel Museum in Topeka, Kansas, in which his expertise is in the antics of America's favorite Daredevil. Please welcome to the show, Joe Pennington. Joe, welcome to Before the Lights.
Thanks much.
Let's start here and let the listeners know who Joe is before we get into Evel. Talk to me about growing up in a steel worker's family.
Okay, well, that's exactly what we did. I'm in my shop right now. If you hear the trains in the background, that's what that is. We're in an industrial area. But my grandfather was a sheet metal worker. My dad was a sheet metal worker. And I took over in 2006, the family business. We specialize in stainless steel with a special invention. It looks like a children's slide in a playground. It's a spiral chute, but it's made for potato chips or peppermints or chicken nuggets instead of children.
So is that to regulate how much goes in each package then?
It's to prevent breakage. So if normally the cooling of the product happens upstairs and the bagging happens downstairs straight below it. So product was dropping, 5, 6, 10 feet and breaking. You don't want that to happen. You want all of your animal crackers to have heads on them, right? So we're the reason you can get a Dorito now about the size of a catcher's mitt.
Joe, was it Evel Knievel where you got your affinity for motorcycles, or was it before that?
Dad had a motorcycle when I was growing up, and so we grew up around motorcycles. But the Evel Knievel Museum came to my hometown, and I'm a hometown boy, so I volunteered at the Evel Knievel Museum and just started that process of learning a whole lot about America's favorite Daredevil.
As you said, you volunteered at the museum. It opened in 2017 in Topeka, Kansas. Let me ask this. How does an Evel Knievel Museum end up in Topeka, Kansas, which has the official approval of the Knievel estate?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mike Patterson owns Historic Harley-Davidson. He's the third generation owner of Historic Harley-Davidson. And Historic Harley-Davidson, as the name would imply, specializes in restoration of historic motorcycles. So owners of vintage motorcycles can buy parts through Mike or send their bikes to the shop. One of the restorations that he did was Jerry Lee Lewis motorcycle. Jerry Lee Lewis got Harley Davidson in the 50s. It was serial number 1. It was kind of a product placement campaign by Harley Davidson. Evel got serial number 2, Elvis got serial number 2. So he wasn't used to taking second backseat to anybody, but he did in this case, Jerry Lee Lewis. So Jerry Lee Lewis had this motorcycle for years and years, and it fell into disrepair as he traveled the world in concerts and everything. And as he was getting older, he always had talked about restoring his Harley Davidson motorcycle. So eventually the family got a hold of Mike Patterson and said, "Hey, can you restore Dad's motorcycle?" Mike goes to Memphis and picks up the motorcycle. It is in pieces. Like he went to pick up a motorcycle, but he ended up picking up about 25-gallon pickle buckets full of parts. Put this motorcycle back together and sent it back to Jerry Lee Lewis. Of course, he was surprised. He loved it so much that he displayed it for the rest of the time he had it in his living room rather than the garage. And then eventually it auctioned off. It ended up being one of the top 10 price-wise motorcycle sales at Mecum Auctions. They had a family friend who was the premier Evel Knievel collector in the world. His name's Lathan. And so the Jerry Lee Lewis family recommended to Lathan that he bring his equipment to Mike Patterson's shop, Historic Harley Davidson. So Lathan's got motorcycles, but significantly, he's got this old circus rig that Evel Knievel used to drive around. It's a big, huge red truck with a Mack truck in front, and then a coach where Evel used his dressing room, and then the rear where Evel would drag around his custom-made cars, his ramps, and his motorcycles. So Mike got charged or took on the challenge of restoring the big red truck. And once that was done, then there was no place for it. It became a traveling museum for a while just to show off the big red truck. Traveled the country to the Mack truck and to the American Truckers Festival and to the Evel Knievel Days in Butte, Montana, then to a Hollywood premiere with Johnny Knoxville. And then it didn't really have a place. So its permanent home became Topeka, Kansas. Mike built a big museum of 13,000 square feet around the big red truck. And that was the start. That's the long story of the start of the Evel Knievel Museum.
As you said, it includes the 74 Mack truck and trailer, has star-spangled helmets, outfits, motorcycles, cars. What kind of response do you hear from guests when they go in and see everything from this museum?
Well, the response is we just had a response from we had some NASCAR drivers in a couple of weeks ago, and they said, I realized you had Evel Knievel stuff here. I didn't realize you had all of Evel Knievel stuff. So that's one response. We haven't had to give anybody their money back for being dissatisfied. But it's easy to see something on, TripAdvisor or the Atlas Obscura and just think, well, this is just some roadside attraction, which it is not. It is a world-class museum, and it's gorgeous. But the number one response I get that I just absolutely love is when guys your age walk into the museum at the entrance and they make this kind of fishing reel action with their hand and their wrist, which is sort of like a secret handshake, which means I had this toy that wound up in 1974 and it did wheelies.
Yep, I remember that. Joe, are there any other exhibits or museums across the country of Evel Knievel, or is this the only one?
I think there's one somewhere in Niagara that I've heard about and maybe seen some snippets on YouTube. Have you looked for any, you extensive researcher?
I have. I mean, I know that Vegas at one time was in negotiations with the one that you have in Topeka, Kansas, but I haven't seen any other ones. I didn't know if there possibly could be other memorabilia that's out there that's on an exhibit somewhere or not.
I don't know. I think there is in Niagara. I haven't been there. And then there used to be one at the highways or the Route 66 Museum in Miami, Oklahoma, but that's also closed and we got most of their stuff.
Evel attempted more than 75 ramp-to-ramp motorcycle jumps. He attended a Joey Chitwood Auto Daredevil show, which was the reason in wanting to become a stuntman. Do you have any background on how all this developed?
Yeah, Joey Chitwood happens to be from Topeka. Did you know that?
I did not.
Yeah, Joey Chitwood was a welder at a metal shop in Topeka, just like what I do. And he moved. Are you familiar with Joey Chitwood?
A little bit, not extensively.
Yeah, he's got a pretty neat little story. He moved here after World War II and lived with his sister and worked at a muffler shop where he welded together pipes. And the state fair was in Topeka, and somebody had a broken hot rod and brought it in for Joey Chitwood to repair, which he did. And then Joey Chitwood delivered the car to the fairgrounds. The driver was too drunk to participate in the race. So Joey said, well, if you've already paid the admission fee, I'll jump in and race your car, which he did. And he won his first race. He won his second race, fell in love with racing, and the racing community fell in love with him. He was a fantastic race car driver. He could take his car up on two wheels, like all left or all right, and drive around a whole track like that. And then he started ramp to ramp jumps through flaming hoops, over other cars, over motorcycles. And then it became a whole traveling circus. It had, rodeo clowns and fire and everything you would need. One of the stops on the Joey Chitwood circuit was Butte, Montana, where a young, impressionable Evel Knievel went to go see him. And crashed into a wall or something and burst into flames and said, man, that's exactly what I want to do the rest of my life. So he went home and he had a bicycle. He pulled the garage doors off his parents' place or grandparents. He lived with his grandparents. His parents left him when he was a little kid, and pulled one door off, set it up on a bucket so that he made a Joey Chitwood style ramp. He pulled the other door off and made a landing ramp. And in between the two, he raked together a whole bunch of yard waste and planned to light it a fire, which he did after he invited all his neighbors to pay a nickel to watch him make this jump. And so that was Evel's first public stunt. And it was the day that he burnt his grandparents' garage doors.
Joe, are you familiar with the story on how he made an earth mover do a motorcycle wheelie and drove it into the main power line in leaving Butte, Montana without electricity?
Yeah, that was the last straw for Anaconda Mines. They hired him. They hired everybody in the town. The whole town of Butte was a mining town. There were thousands and thousands of miners and probably even more prostitutes. But so what you would do is you go to high school, and once you graduate, or even if you don't, you go to work at the Anaconda Mines. He was hired as a driver to bring crews from the parking lot and shuttle them over to the head of the mines in the mornings. But there were so many complaints about his bad driving that they reassigned him to the earth mover. And yeah, he had the bulldozer load up the very rear of that earth mover so that he could get that counterweight in the very back and do a wheelie. I don't know that he took down the power line on purpose, but he did take down that power line and got fired.
Can you tell the story on how he obtained the nickname Evel after spending a night in jail in 1956?
Yeah, the legend is that we've got this teenager running around town. He's just a hoodlum, right? Raising hell and racing his motorcycle around, outrunning police on the motorcycle. But it's not the first time he gets arrested. One day he does get arrested and gets thrown in a cell in Butte, Montana. There happened to be a murder the previous week, and the murderer was named Knievel, something Knievel. And so as the day watch switched hands off to the night watch, the guard says, watch out for this couple. It's Evel Knievel and Awful Knievel. And
that's how the legend began.
Yeah. And he always wanted to be a white hat, though. He always wanted to be a good guy, despite of himself. He had these terrible tendencies to be a bad boy, but he wanted to be a white hat. So he changed the letters to EVEL instead of EVIL. But it also coincides with the last four letters of his last name. So maybe that's why.
Listeners, I'm going to read off some stuff that Evel Knievel did in his life. He wasn't just always a daredevil. He participated in professional rodeos, ski jumping. He was a pole vaulter on the track team. He started a semi-hockey team called the Butte Bombers. He was a successful insurance salesman. He operated a motorcycle dealership and even started Sir Kill Guide Services for hunting. And then in 1961, he hitchhiked from Butte, Montana to Washington, D.C. to raise awareness to have the elk relocated to an area where hunting was permitted. Is there any of this stuff in the museum by chance, Joe, about these things he did?
Yes. Yeah, there's a con to every single one of those stories, it sounds like. One of my favorites, and this was an inspiration. Your show is called How They Made Their Mark. And one of those stories is for the Combined Insurance Company of Chicago. It was owned by W. Clement Stone. He was also an author. So he's like Tony Robbins kind of guy. He writes these books that anything that you can visualize, you can make a reality just by using a positive mental attitude, a PMA. So Evel buys into all of this, the whole thing, and wants to go work for W. Clement Stone, writes to W. Clement Stone, man, I was so inspired by your book. I want to come work for you at Combined Insurance of Chicago, which he is hired by W. Clement Stone as an insurance salesman, still lives in Butte. And the Combined Insurance Company has a competition, a national competition, which was just coincidentally called I Dare You Week, to see who could sell the most policies in 1 week. Evel Knievel blows all of the records out of the water by selling 110 policies in 1 day at a mental institution.
The man was the ultimate hustler. The ultimate hustler.
Yeah.
Do you know what stunt launched him from county fairs to becoming a household name? Or was the big break for Evel Knievel the Joey Bishop show?
Evel did these stunts. He'd just do it for hamburgers outside the drive-in. He'd ride up a rough road up the side of a mountain, and just for the entertainment of people that were parked there. That wasn't his big break. His big break was in Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. I would say it's his biggest break. He had been on television before, just for a few minutes, like 14 seconds on ABC's Wide World of Sports. But he's in 1967, he switched from a black motorcycling outfit and leathers to red, white, and blue. He wanted to be counter to the counterculture, and also he wanted to stand out. And the prevailing culture seemed to be, from what I read, I didn't live through it, but hippies spitting on soldiers, and you got Watergate about to break open. So he wants to be a patriot, but he's not getting much work. He tried this Joey Chitwood style show where he hired little people and had outhouses and clowns and motorcycle and high wire act and all this stuff, but he couldn't make payroll. He broke his back, so nobody was going to go see the show without Evel Knievel in it. So he's sitting at a bar in Butte, Montana, with nothing better to do, when one of his friends say, "Hey, did you hear Rick Rouse is boxing in Vegas this weekend?" And Rick Rouse is a local Butte athlete. So Evel says, "No, I didn't hear that." And so they pile in the van. They said that we're going to go support our local buddy, fellow beautician. I don't know, a beautian. And we're going to road trip it to Vegas and support Rick. So they do just that. They pull up to where the venue is to check it out before the venue, and it happens to be at Caesar's Palace. Caesar's Palace is this brand new $25 million hotel built by Jay Sarnos, and it's got the Greek columns, and the hostess is dressed like Olympian goddesses, and it's just beautiful. And they cannot afford to stay there at the hotel, but they can afford a beer. So they belly up to the bar, and one of his buddies says, "This place doesn't have an entertainer, a house entertainer like Sinatra over at the Sands or Sammy Davis Jr. over at the Dune. You ought to do your motorcycle tricks here. That would be a real draw. And you could be their house entertainment here at Caesar's Palace. Look at those fountains. You could jump over those fountains." And Evel said, "Yeah, the more I drank, the smaller the fountains got, to where I decided, I'm going to go jump those fountains. So I'm going to call the owner, Jay Sarnos, and introduce himself and just work out a deal." So he calls Jay Sarnos. "Hey, it's Evel Knievel. Can I speak with Mr. Sarnos, please?" And the receptionist is a gatekeeper, and she doesn't know Evel Knievel, even though he explains, "I was famous. I was on ABC's Wide World of Sports for 14 seconds last year." And so he begins to disguise his voice so he can get patched through, right? "Hi, it's Rick Hildeman from ABC's Wide World of Sports, and I understand that Evel Knievel is jumping your fountains on New Year's Eve. Just calling to make sure you have enough rooms for me and my entire crew." Sarno says, "Never heard of it." Click. "Hey, it's Sammy Smith from Sports Illustrated. My boss told me to come take pictures of this Evel Knievel character jumping your fountains on New Year's Eve. What time does that start?" Sarno says, "Call me back." And eventually Evel Knievel does about a half a dozen of these different voices. The last of which is a lawyer accent. "Hello, this is Saul Rosenberg. I understand that you are promoting an event in which my client, Evel Knievel, is to jump your fountains. Now, I'm inclined to sue you because we do not have such an agreement to do this event. As it happens, I'm going out of town to Europe with another of my clients. You may have heard of Lawrence Welk, but coincidentally, Evel Knievel is in Las Vegas and available to meet with you tomorrow. And by then, Sarnos says, send him up. Right? So Evel goes at the appointed time up the elevator to introduce himself and meet in person with Sarnos. And the receptionist excitedly jumps out of her chair, rushes back to Sarnos' office, and he can hear her saying, he's here, he's here, he's here. Right. And then Sarnos bursts out, both arms extended. Where you been, boy? I've been looking all over for you. So this is the one that really put him on the map. Sarnos had a whole lot of money to put behind the promotion of that event so that people did show up, and a whole lot of people did show up. And Evel Knievel had to pay to have that filmed himself. ABC's Wild World of Sports would not come cover it. And so he owned that film it's pretty famous. I'm sure you've seen it, Tommy, of him kind of ragdolling around the parking lot there, broke 2 ankles, broke both of his wrists, broke his pelvis, broke his collarbone, broke his femur, broke a whole lot. And that, I guess you would call it, that video went viral back in the day, but it was a lot more physically taking it from place to place. Evel owned that footage, and he took it on the Joey Bishop show, and he took it on a Dick Cavett show, and anywhere that he could, and spread the word of the name Evel Knievel.
Is there any truth to what you know about Evel Knievel, that he had this love of wild turkey and would do a shot before each one of his jumps?
Yeah, that's true. Every single jump that I know of, he would do at least a shot of wild turkey.
He should have got a sponsorship from Wild Turkey.
He should have, man.
Do you know the story behind how he was able to do the Snake Canyon jump in 1974?
Oh, well, yeah, he had this idea that he was going to jump over the Grand Canyon for years, and he would take that story and present it as if it was true on these talk shows. I'm going to jump the Grand Canyon. I'm going to jump the Grand Canyon. And so the whole buildup to that was years in the making. Stuart Udall, the Secretary of the Interior under, I don't know, who's 1974? Nixon or Carter. Anyways, Stuart Udall said, "You're not jumping over the Grand Canyon. That's a federal national treasure." So he arranged to get some property near his home in Boise or Twin Falls, Idaho, and so he secured the land. Didn't have a rocket. He had this really hokey-looking trike with 2 jet engines kind of duct taped onto it. And he took that around the country saying, I'm going to jump over the canyon in this. I think Robert Truax called him and said, hey, I'm an ex-NASA engineer. I can really get you over that canyon. So he was very fortunate to have a real engineer step in and offer to do that. Man, there is a lot to that story. That is a long, long story. One of the impacts of that whole thing was pay-per-view television. Not very popular up to that point. Boxing was kind of a niche sport that people would pay for through pay-per-view or direct television, or you'd drive to the movies and give the movies some dollars to watch the live feed from Vegas. But Evel hired Vince McMahon Jr. He was a young wrestling promoter out of Connecticut or somewhere east, and kind of wanted to get out from under his father's shadow in the wrestling world, make him a name for himself. So Vince signed on with Evel Knievel, and part of his deal was he really wanted to switch to this pay-per-view rather than not even going. So Vince bought cameras and bought redundant cameras and laid wire and secured rights to the wires around the whole country to set up this pay-per-view. And many, many people went. A lot more people watched that than watched boxing previous. And then a whole lot more watched it for WrestleManias over the years.
This is my story. No symptoms to being diagnosed with colon cancer, which led to 4 surgeries and a 50-50 survival rate. It then spread to my liver, in which only 3% are caught in time. Now, a 1% chance it ever comes back. And I'm on the road to inspiring everyone, because you have 3 choices: live, die, or fight. Bernie Siegel said, no matter what the statistics say, there's always a way. To book me, Tommy Canale, to speak to your event or group, go to TommyCanale.com. That's TommyCanale.com, and get ready to be inspired to inspire others, because you're one day away from changing your life. Click the link in the show notes. Do you think it was the fame, the thrill, the money, or all that kept him coming back to perform?
Oh, that's a really great question. What do you think?
I think it's all of it.
Yeah.
I think Evel enjoyed the fame. I think he definitely enjoyed the thrill. It was definitely for the money. I think it was all of it, because to beat up your body as bad as Evel Knievel did, most people would say, all right, I'm done. But he just kept coming back and coming back to perform. I think it's all of it.
I think you're right.
1977, Shark Jump was the final retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak about what happened during that jump to my listeners?
Yeah, 1977 was the worst year of Evel Knievel's life. He was, as you said, it was his final retirement. So he was kind of courted out of retirement, which was Kings Island, which was his greatest moment. You know, in that year, Evel got to perform with his son, got to leap over the largest gap. Was on national television. It was the highest rated show in ABC's Wide World of Sports history, and gets to walk out the top of the ramp, you know, with the wind blowing his hair and his cape flowing, and say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for these many, many years of support. I retire. And he should have stayed that way, except CBS called him and said, if ABC is done with you, we have this new technology we'd like to try out, and we want to do a big spectacular all centered around you. They're speaking of Evel Knievel's ego, which lies very thin right under his skin. And so they had arranged to have many different daredevils from around the world perform stunts all on the same evening, while they switched from venue to venue to venue using new satellite television technology. So the whole show turned out to be a disaster. It was hosted by Telly Savalas, and he switched. He said, we're going to go to Butte, Montana, and watch a snowmobiler do a flip. But it was blizzard conditions. You couldn't see it. So right after this commercial break, we'll show you the Walinda brothers going on a tightrope across 2 skyscrapers in Miami. Well, when they got back, it turned out to be too windy. They had a Russian guy that was advertised to blow himself up. He puts 30 pounds of dynamite under his chair and goes sky high. Well, for his American debut, he used 50 pounds of dynamite instead of 30. Instead of his black leather motorcycling outfit, he rents a tuxedo and goes sky high, comes down, lands on his head. The press rushes in. What happened? What happened? How it happened? He says, no interview, no interview. So he wants to go back to the plane, and he wants to go home. He didn't want to go back to the hotel. So they pile him in a limousine, send him towards the airport. He says, one stop, where he goes to the dry cleaner and throws this shredded tuxedo through the window. The whole show is like that. What happened the day of, so hours before the live feed, Evel Knievel was directed to make a practice jump. He got in a fight with the young producer of the show, who I think was Brett Musburger. And anyway, ended up punching one of the crew and strapped on his helmet, took his shot of wild turkey and said, "You want a practice run? I'll show you a practice run." Hits the throttle, comes up, makes it over this tank of 13 live sharks. Well, 7 of them were live. The rest of them didn't quite survive the trip from Florida in January in Chicago, right? So he doesn't make it, but he does slip off the side of the ramp into a cameraman. The cameraman loses his eyesight, and Evel Knievel's broken both of his arms. So all that is to say that you and I watched this in our living room for 2 hours, waiting for Evel Knievel to show up. And Telly Savalas says, Evel won't be here. He's in the hospital, but we have this mediocre footage from what happened earlier today. They not only told us that live in our living rooms, but they let people in the Chicago International Amphitheater to buy T-shirts, beer, popcorn, thinking they were going to see Evel Knievel. So that was bad.
Bad.
He did not have a retirement announcement after that. He was laid up in the hospital and got lots and lots of hate. There's so much angry mail about that his lawyer advised him not to open that mail. We got bags and bags of unopened mail when we opened the museum, and we did open it all, and it wasn't nearly as much hate mail as his lawyer had feared. So we have a whole bunch of really nice love letters and fan mail in the museum.
Cool. Can you talk about Evel being known for keeping his word, even when he knew some of these jumps he was going to do were questionable?
Yeah, I think that Snake River Canyon was the pinnacle of that. He was convinced he was going to die. He really was convinced he was going to die in that moment. But like he said, what am I going to do? Give them their money back?
Right. Well, when your life's on the line, you might want to think about that. But Evel just said full throttle, we're going ahead.
Yes.
Do you have any knowledge of what happened when he had an assault on his promoter for the Snake River Canyon by the name of Shelley Saltman, who wrote a book called Evel Knievel on Tour, and Evel was given 3 years probation and 6 months in jail after pleading guilty to battery?
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah. So when I said that 1977 was the worst year of Evel Knievel's life, this is like a continuation of that snake or of the shark tank wreck. So Evel's got these 2 casts on. He's released from the hospital, and he decides, I am done with. He didn't have a retirement speech, but he is done. Right? He's done hurting himself, and in addition to that, he had injured an innocent bystander, the cameraman, while he was reportedly drunk. So he's enough of that. Easy enough. There's other ways to make money, right? One of them is in Hollywood. So he heads to Hollywood, teams up with Universal Pictures, films The Bionic Woman with Lindsay Wagner, goes on the Sonny and Cher show with one of his big trike motorcycles, and films this movie Viva Knievel with a whole bunch of his equipment. Meantime, this book comes out by Shelley Saltman, and it's kind of a unsavory rendition or recollection of their experience together, Shelley Saltman and Evel Knievel. Shelley had permission to write the book. It was authorized by Evel Knievel. Every quotation in it was recorded on a recording device, which is, you can't secretly transplant or plant a mic in the 1970s. They looked like a shoebox, you know? So he wore this thing around his neck. I guess Evel doesn't exactly dispute that any of the quotes are inaccurate, but he didn't like seeing this stuff in print about womanizing and alcoholism. 2 things that he would brag about on Johnny Carson or whatever TV show he could get on, but he didn't like seeing it in print. So he buys the book, takes it up to his hotel room along with his wild turkey, and begins to read the book and discovering what it's all about. These 2 had got the idea from Muhammad Ali and his promoter, incidentally. And Evel just kind of starts foaming at the mouth and writing in the margins, lies, 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 tearing pages out, when all of a sudden it dawns on him that no good son of a gun, Shelley Saltman, is also done with sports. He's also trying to get into the movies. I'm going to go pay him a visit. True enough, Shelley Saltman was working at Fox at the time, 20th Century Fox at the time. And he's on his way to lunch one day. It's not uncommon for him to see famous people at Fox, waves to one of them, or sees Evel Knievel, and doesn't think anything of it because this was all authorized. He doesn't know Evel Knievel's pissed. Evel had hired a thug to hold Shelley down while Evel Knievel beats him. How could Evel Knievel beat him, without hiring somebody? He's got these two casts on. But he does have an aluminum baseball bat, hits Shelley in the head. Shelley's able to save his skull by crossing his arms, and fractured both of his forearms and had to have lots of surgery over that, but ends up unconscious in a pool of blood. Witnesses think they might have just saw a scene being filmed, but realize, hey, that's real blood. That's not fake blood. And that's not an actor. That's the guy from the VHS department that does all the dubbing. So I guess maybe that's the real Evel Knievel. Put out a warrant for Evel's arrest. Evel turns himself in the next day. Appears before the judge. Lawyer pleads not guilty on his client's behalf. Evel shuts the lawyer down. Guilty as charged, Your Honor. Only regret I have is I didn't finish the job. Judge says, that's very refreshing. You're going to jail. So, as you said, he was sentenced to jail. But it was more than an imprisonment. It was the end of his everything. It was the end of his marriage. All his sponsors pulled out. When all the sponsors pulled out, and you can understand, Chuckles Candy says, you're no role model for kids. And Harley Davidson rips up their contract. And his big money maker was this ideal toy wheelie car. And they rebranded that to Team America from Evel Knievel. So he didn't have any income anymore. And once the income dried up, then the creditors moved in and took the yacht, 7 boats, all of his motorcycles, custom-made cars, 2 Learjets. He had 1 Learjet with his name painted on the side of it. Realized he couldn't read the name painted on the side of it while he was flying, so he had another identical to fly alongside. Took the helicopter. I mean, they took everything. Took the house, and he went to jail. Shelley Saltman sued him and was awarded $12.7 million. Evel Knievel kind of made it his life's mission not to repay a dime to that SOB. And so he didn't do any more movies, didn't do any more television or stunts or sports or motorcycles or anything really. He hustled golf for cash or maybe sign autographs at the local car park or something. But it was spite that he never snapped out of it. Because, there's so many people, they just, you apologize and you move on. There's careers after missteps, but he just made it his life's mission to stay broke.
It was too bad. I mean, the end of his life was tough too. He passed away in 2007 at 69 years of age from pulmonary disease. And he had a repercussion of years of damaging his body and paid the toll later in life. He was diagnosed with terminal lung disease. He had an internal morphine pump put in for pain, and he suffered 2 strokes in his lifetime before he finally passed away.
Evel, even though he did live broke, and he was broke, he had there's a letter in the museum that he wrote to the IRS that says, hey, I got your collection letter last month. Need you to understand something about Evel Knievel. I don't have any money. If I ever do have an extra 20 or 30 bucks, I take all my creditors' name up, put them in a hat. I pull one out and I send them, 20 bucks or so. And if you don't stop sending me nasty letters, I'm not putting your name in the hat anymore. So there's that.
Speaking regarding Evel Knievel's drive, his determination, and this positive mindset that he had.
Okay. Well, I think that definitely has its roots with the W. Clement Stone. And he espoused that through his entire career, and he influenced millions of us children and adults too. Like to kids, it was, if he can jump over that canyon. I can jump over the creek with my bicycle. And the inspiration to adults would be like, he was unapologetically patriotic. And I think that influenced a lot of people too. Like, it's okay. It's okay to wear red, white, and blue. You can do that.
Is there a tale of a visitor to the museum who actually stood up to his abusive father after learning more about Evel?
Oh yeah, man. That's so cool that we have. Somebody asked me what the best part about the museum is. Well, what's your favorite thing in the museum? And I was like, visitors, man. I get the coolest, most touching stories from visitors. You know, when I do tours, I'm doing 90% of the talking because that's just the nature of the job. But I'm going through with the museum with this guy, and we get to one of the displays that has a list of Evel Knievel's charitable contributions, like to the 4-H club or to the Boy Scouts of America. And one of them is an orphanage. Evel sent a whole orphanage of kids to his shows. He never wanted to leave a kid disappointed. So, and orphans held a special place in his heart too, because Evel's parents both moved away from Butte when he was a very young child and left him with his grandparents. So anyways, I'm telling the story of these orphans, and this guy says, yeah, you know, I guess I'm lucky to have parents, but they weren't the greatest parents in the world. I never knew my real dad, who my real dad was. My mom just kind of slept around with anybody, but eventually this one guy did kind of stick, and he was my role model. He'd go rob gas stations or liquor stores, and I thought that was okay because he's buying us groceries. But so that's where I grew up, and I always had to work. I sacked groceries at a place, at a nearby grocer, because I wanted to save up some money. I was in high school, and they advertised this class ring. You're a senior this year. You ought to have a class ring. And I thought I ought to have a class ring. So I worked, and every week I saved my money until I finally had enough for that class ring, and I was going to graduate. And so I ordered it and got it. And one day I went to work and got off. It was the morning shift, and I got off and I went home, and my mom's arguing with this scumbag. And she's saying, where'd you get the money to buy that weed? And he says, none of your business. But they got into it, and it turned out that the guy admitted he stole the kid's class ring, melted it down, sold it at a pawn shop so he could buy weed. And the fight escalates. He starts beating the mom, and the kid just wants to crawl in a hole. So he goes down into the basement, turns on the television, and it's Evel Knievel. And Evel Knievel's about to do this jump, and he thinks, if Evel Knievel can make this jump, I can stand up to that scumbag. So Evel Knievel makes the jump. The kid goes upstairs, throws the scumbag up against the wall, tells him never to touch his mother again. And the guy leaves, and never to be seen again. So Evel had an impact on millions, but Evel had impact he didn't even know on such an individual basis that he could never have known.
I would agree with you. Talk about the induction into the Motorcycle Hall of Fame for Evel Knievel.
I don't know anything about that other than I watched it, and he didn't look like the same Evel Knievel I remember. Got time for one more story though?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, this is at the end. Dr. Reverend Robert Schuller had this program that was an inspirational program. It was called The Hour of Power, and it was broadcast live from the Crystal Cathedral in Pasadena, California. And he was he was a motivator himself. You know, he was a W. Clement Stone with a whole lot of Jesus sprinkled onto it. And one day, Dr. Reverend Robert Schuller gets a phone call. The other end of the line said, "Hey, this is Robert Knievel. I invented Evel Knievel. I was Evel Knievel, and I Evel Knieveled a whole lot of people over my life. I was watching your program today and found God, and I took my whiskey bottle and I threw it on the beach, and I said, you can go live with Satan, you can go live with the eels and the squids, but no longer part of my life. I'm done drinking. I'm done womanizing. I'm done treating the people the way that I have. I'm real remorseful about it, and I want to come on your program and get baptized next week. So Schuler flies to Florida to find that Evel is sincere and repentant, flies back to meet with his staff at the Crystal Cathedral, says, don't know what you kids had planned for this week, but it's off. We're going to baptize Evel Knievel. One of the staff members says, Evel Knievel, isn't he that guy that tried to kill his biographer 30 years ago? Yeah, why? Well, because Shelley Saltman is a friend of my family, and he lives like 15, 20 minutes away in Los Angeles. So Schuler takes the hint, calls up Shelley Saltman, says, hi, Shelley, I understand that you're not a Christian, but I have this program, and it would mean a lot to me if you would come on, and it would mean the world to my congregation, which is millions of viewers around the world. And it would mean even more to Evel Knievel if you could come to his baptism ceremony and talk about forgiveness. Hello? Right? No response for a whole minute. And then Shelley responds, yes, I will come to his baptism ceremony on one condition: if I get to be the one holding his head underwater. So they go through the baptism ceremony without Shelley Saltman there, but Evel gives a real stirring speech. It's on YouTube now, The Hour of Power, and then dies months later from officially any of those things that you just said, but officially pulmonary fibrosis.
How has Evel Knievel inspired Joe Pennington?
Yeah, man. It's pretty incredible to run across somebody that I think he says something inspirational in every single quote I read. He's so funny but it's that positive mental attitude that has really inspired me to do anything, everything. And that's where that comes from.
Has Evel helped you in your business in any aspect?
Yeah, probably so. Yeah, I'm unafraid to call customers. I'm always up for a challenge, and I always challenge myself to come up with new innovations. I don't know that that's directly from Evel Knievel, but I spend a day out of every week at that Evel Knievel Museum, kind of getting it pounded into me that you're going to have a positive attitude, and there's nothing you cannot do.
Tell my listeners the days and hours of operation for the museum in Topeka, Kansas.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I can't wait for people to come to the museum. Visitors are my favorite part. The days and the hour, we're open Tuesday through Saturday. So in other words, closed Sunday and Monday. And the hours are generally 10 to 5 daytimes.
And what's the cost of admission?
$15, and then there's discounts for veterans and seniors. And there's a little upcharge for a really fun virtual reality experience. It's $5 to get on this motorcycle. Strap the VR goggles on you. You sit on a real motorcycle on Evel Knievel's ramps that vibrates now with the headphones sounds, and with fans blow on your left side if you're turning left or right if right. It's a really fun ride.
Cool. I'll put a link in the show notes, listeners, so you can click on it and check out the museum. And if you're in the area, please go by, see Joe, say hello, say, hey, I listened to you on Before the Lights. You guys can have a nice chat and go check out the museum. In today's real estate market, you need to work with a real estate professional who you can trust. Amy Canale is a proud member of the Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Network in Nevada. She will provide the absolute finest service, dedication, and expertise possible. Whether you want to buy, sell, or rent, Amy can help make your home ownership dreams come true. To contact Amy, call 480-685-1217, go to her website, amycanale.com, or click the link in the show notes, BS 0146092. Joe, thanks for your time and coming on the show.
Yeah, likely, Tommy. You're fun.
Thank you so much. Listeners, follow me on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. And I think this is a great time for you guys to go to the website and click on the docu-series and check out the 11 episode that I did with Antonino D'Ambrosio, who is a film director. We did a podcast docu-series in support of Native American rights on the harsh and unfair treatment of the indigenous community. So check out the docu-series there. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, I salute a chin chin.